Now, I'm pretty sure your counselor or whoever has told you this when writing your essay. You have a story, tell it. And when I came to writing with me, I tackled that dreaded Common App essay, those oh so scary UC prompts, and I did it. I told my story. And now, like any good story, we must have a plot. So this is the typical plot diagram that we've all seen at one point in our English class. I know I've seen it multiple times. I've got the words rising action tattooed into my brain, essentially. So we start with your exposition, your beginning. You see that angle between exposition and rising action? That's called the conflict, and that's where problems arise. You then go to your rising action to reach into your climax, which is essentially a change in the character, the protagonist. The protagonist of my story being me, and the protagonist in your story being you. Falling action, where you are closer to reaching your resolution, and then your resolution, your grand finale. So, my exposition, start of my story. I was born Daniela Flores, October 20th, 1999, in the small town of Trujillo in La Libertad, Peru. And the first photo there is of me and my mom. I don't know how old I was, but I know I was a baby, so very, very young. And when I was 2 years old, my mother went to work for a work trip in the United States, and there she met my father. Second pick. This was after my mother had met my father. When I was 4.5, they ended up getting married in my mother's home country of Peru. And when I was 5, we ended up moving to the States, Los Angeles to be exact. That was one of the first photos taken when I was in my first year of being in the States. As you can see, I'm content to be there, but not gonna lie, that same little girl who was very content with being there was also really scared and nervous because, you know, the whole new country, new language, new everything and anything thing. Also, that's my dad. He's a lovely person. He's in the crowd right now. And so, after that, of course, you were a little kid. I was a little kid who kind of didn't really know what was going on in the world. So the first thing I did was I ended up trying to learn English. And so I did, and that was one of the things that helped contribute to the girl in the third pick. I was roughly 13 when that was taken. That was me after going through elementary school, eventually learning English, becoming one of the top stereotypically successful kids in my class. I was in the gifted program. And that was also when I began dancing through my middle school. I was able to get into the program through that. Now comes the conflict time. Conflict/rising action. Depression? So everything I would say was going pretty well up until my freshman year. So the school that I had been attending from 6th up until my sophomore year happened to be a very small 6 through 12 school, roughly 100 kids a class. It's really tough to make good friends when there's only 99 other kids to choose from, and I myself already I'm not the best at making friends, not gonna lie. I am horrible when it comes to social interactions. And this started to contribute to me starting to feel clinically depressed. It immediately got worse though, my sophomore year. I was originally until the beginning of sophomore year, a 4.0 student. My dream was to go to Stanford and become a doctor and succeed in the world and become super rich and so on and so forth, and all these great things that people often look up to in life. That did all change sophomore year because, like I said, I was feeling depressed. My grades ended up tanking, mainly from me intentionally tanking my grades because I wanted out of the school, but not just out of the school. I wanted out of life. Ultimately, sophomore year, I began to self-harm, and on April 2nd, 2016, I made an attempt to end my life. This is the first time I've ever shared this in front of a crowd, let alone so many people here. I know there are people who don't know what I've been through, but I'm so glad that I was able to make it out. That day, I realized that was the lowest point I've ever reached in my life, and I needed out. I needed my conflict. I needed to be able to make a change in my life and therefore make a change in myself. So I got help. The first help, though, was my climax. Now, here we have two stock images of schools. The first, which represents my big climax. I told my parents what I was going through, and we ultimately made the decision to switch schools. Now, this was when I arrived to the Culver City School District. I've only been at the school for less than 2 years at this point, and I am oh my gosh, I suck at this. I'm really sorry. Yeah, wait. I suck at technology. I don't know why I'm here, honestly.
You're awesome.
As I was saying, transferring schools. The night before I started my first day at Culver High, August 21st, 2016, I had a very tough time sleeping. Why? I was really nervous. Why? Because I was going to a new school for the first time in 5 years. Yep, 5 years. So of course I would have been nervous. I was scared. I was scared that I was going to end up going through the same things that I did at my old school, at my new school, and things were going to work out. Luckily, things are working out pretty okay. Denial. So after a month or two at my old school, at my new school, I still realized things still not feeling the best. This is November of 2016 was when I first started seeking professional help. I began going to professional therapy to essentially work out my mind. Now, this was when I actually received the full diagnosis of, oh yeah, you've been clinically depressed this entire time. There's this issue. Now, at first, I can tell you, I was pretty in shock. Even though I already knew what's been going on, I was still in denial. Of course I'm going to be in denial. And I think, oh, this isn't me. I'm living such a great, perfect, handy-dandy life. I'm just supposed to be a happy, normal, happy-go-lucky high schooler going about through her day. Now, acceptance. Acceptance is one of the key things to realizing that you're going through something through life like this. It took me a while to accept the fact, but now ultimately I've accepted my past, and I have a positive outlook on the future now through what I've gone through before. Now my falling action. For me, my falling action to my current story that I'm experiencing at the moment is currently, as you can see, first pick, I began dancing again. I joined ABPA, and as you can see, a few of my fellow company members recognize themselves in that photo. Second, on the two photos on the right side, that's me with a good friend on Halloween. The other pic is of me and a few other good friends at a concert. As you can see, some good memories were made on those days. In fact, all of these photos have good memories and good things connotated to them. And that last pic, that was the most recent photo I added onto here. That was a few weeks ago when I got my cap and gown pics taken to officially symbolize the culmination of my high school experience and my senior year. Now, it's still a big shock for me to look at those photos, I'm not gonna lie. It's, oh my God, I really did do that. I made it that far. If you would have shown me those photos of me back when sophomore year when I was just down in such a bad state, I would have laughed in your face. I would have told you that I would never be able to make it to that point. What will my future even be? And that is a big question mark. I have no clue. I'm only 18. I don't know what I'm gonna end up doing 10 years from now. I don't even know what I'm gonna end up doing next week, honestly. But I know it's gonna be something, and I know it's gonna be something good. Moral, and like any good story here, we have a moral. And my moral is that you are not alone. A lot of the times, a lot of the reasons that you feel so isolated are because you feel lonely. You feel, oh, Nobody else is going through this horrible thing that I'm going through. When a lot of the times, you're wrong. Take a look around you. A lot of these people have inner stories that they have yet to share. Their deepest, darkest, worst points in their life. And you have yours. You may end up eventually finding somebody who shares your story. I know, as some of you in the audience, I've heard some of your stories. Some of the speakers who are here tonight, I've heard their stories. All of these stories that I've known and I've heard ultimately made me just think about the power of telling your story. This is the reason why we do these college essays. The reason why we have TED Talks. The reason why I am here on this stage right now fighting all of my nerves and anxiety and the fact that I am rambling at the moment to talk to you about what I've experienced and the fact that I am telling my story as I speak. Now, my story time is over. I challenge you to go tell yours.
Okay, well, like Daniela and all of the other speakers that have gone already, I am extremely nervous. I had many doubts. I wanted to not do this last second, literally since I applied to be a part of this Culver talk. And I can't do better than at 1570, but what I can do is provide you guys, the audience, with my views on interactions, memories, and connections. As humans, we're placed on Earth with with this need to survive, and in order to survive, we have to interact with people, and whether we like it or not, it becomes something that we unconsciously do, like these common courtesies, like when someone drops something, you pick it up, or open the door for someone when they're behind you. Well, I want you guys to emphasize and cherish these interactions and memories as if they were more meaningful than they already are, given that it's a small occurrence that happens like very in a short amount of time, and you'll probably forget it later in life, but I want you guys to at least try and put yourself out there and make these memories and connections. So I want to talk about my great-grandmother. That is my great-grandmother with my great-grandfather. They were high school sweethearts since the 1950s, and I cannot say how much I love and cherish and look up to them. 2007, my great-grandfather has a heart attack and passes away. He was a volunteer. He's a volunteer at as a firefighter in Culver City ever since he moved to Culver City since the 1950s. And my great-grandmother, I'm mostly not sure what she does. She did work at JCPenney's for a very long time, so that's hard work. But after my great-grandfather had died, my great-grandmother, I'm just going to refer to her as grandma for now, it took a toll on her. It was very emotional, love of her life, spent all her life with him, had 3 kids. But that following year, she was taken to intensive care because she had had an aneurysm. And out of the 20 plus people on that floor, she was the only one to survive. And I cannot say how grateful I am that she did survive. Because what I'm about to tell you is very meaningful to me, but also very traumatic and traumatizing. Because at the beginning of high school, freshman year, her signs of Alzheimer's had begun to occur, and I had taken it upon myself to visit her more often, spend more time with her. Not because I needed to, but because I knew that the time had officially begun ticking for, her life was going to end within 3 years, so I wanted to maximize the amount of time I would be able to spend with her. So freshman year, it wasn't as interactive, but I began going after school to her house because we live like 30 seconds away, and I had begun to go after school, take out my homework, sit next to her, just not so much talk or interact, just be there with her, because since her love of her life was gone and everyone was working during the day or at school, I wanted to be the person there for her until the rest of my family had gotten home, or at least called her or talked to her. But as with Alzheimer's, as I researched in my freshman year, it was definitely a deadly disease. It would eventually consume her mind, and that sophomore year, it had gotten worse, and I can't express how hard it was, given that I was so involved in her life, and it wasn't as serious as in freshman year, but sophomore year it really was a lot harder. She begun to be more aggressive, more hostile, forgetting family members' names, and it was very hard to not get emotional or get angry or upset. But I had pushed through, and I took it upon myself to move in with her and increasingly maximize the time I had began to spend with her. And she was one that had always done those crossword puzzles in those little books, by the end of sophomore year, she began to become so hostile and so aggressive that she did not want to do most of the daily tasks that we all do, like take a bath, or take a shower, brush your teeth, eat, do her crossword puzzles. She didn't want to do those anymore. And come junior year, she mostly never recognized me, and even though that was really hard for me to handle, I had still, knowing that her aggression would lead to her untimely fate soon enough, and I chose to stay with her right up until January of 2017, I was in my junior year, and we had decided that through all this aggression and all this pain that we had gone through and that she had gone through, it was best to put her, or to place her in an assisted living home. And from then, I had felt as if I knew I was going to lose that connection, the time I had spent with her. It would become less, it would become minimized, it would become shorter, and I didn't want to deal with that. But at the same time, my visits to her assisted living home were less frequent, and I began to feel very guilty, as if that I wasn't doing enough to visit her, to spend time with her, even though she didn't recognize me. It was still nice for me to know that whenever she does pass, which was going to become very soon, that I would have spent as much time with her as I wanted to and had needed to. And in June of 2017, that same year, she had become increasingly worse, and to the point where she could barely get up off the couch, and she had to have the nurses in this assisted living home help her. And when it got to be too much, most of her bodily function, she couldn't function anymore, so she had to be placed in a hospital. And that was at the end of June, and in July, after about a week or so in the hospital, she had passed. And I can remember the emotions, the guilt, the frustration, the anger, the sadness, all these feelings I had had when my aunt had come home and had told me that she had passed. I had wanted to be there. Then I was there the night before, but I was extremely tired and I didn't want to stay at the hospital, so I had went home. And I really regret that because I knew that she would pass untimely, but I didn't know it would be so soon. And the whole point of this story, or this anecdote, is not to get this sympathy or this empathy or these emotions or provide something for me. I am here for this story to provide for you guys. I want you guys to learn from my experience of this sense of guilt I have for not having enough connection with the person I love. I want you guys to reach out to someone you love, to someone you interact with, a coworker, a family member, a friend, anyone that you interact with on a daily basis. I want you to put yourself out there and develop a stronger connection so that you guys can make better memories and they can become these strong connections.
So I have a confession to make. And that is, the only time I have ever studied is the night before a test. And I'd like to say it's because I don't have to study before that, or because studying the night before is fine, but really, it's more procrastination. Every time I want to study, I find myself thinking, I'll just do that tomorrow. Until eventually, it's 9 o'clock at night and the test is tomorrow, and I frantically reread my notes. And then came the SAT. No, I didn't grow up in this country. My parents didn't take the SAT, and I didn't actively seek out any information on it. I just knew that it was this test we had to take in junior year. So I heard about this practice SAT in this very room a couple of months ago, and I decided to take it. And I got a 1280. And I remember thinking, my very first thought was, wow, a 1280. The best I've ever done on a test before is a 100. And now I'm getting a 1280. And then I realized I probably wasn't graded out of 100. So I looked up the average score, and the average score is a 1080. So now I'm thinking, wow, a whole 200 points better than the average score. And I was pretty happy with myself. And then I looked at the average score of my first choice college, Stanford. And it was a 1520. So obviously the first thing I did was I went home and I Googled, can you improve your SAT score 250 points in one night? The answer is no. It was going to take weeks, even months, of studying to improve my score that much. So over winter break, I decided to start studying. And by that I meant I watched videos on YouTube of how other people studied, and I read articles on how to be productive. But then on January 8th, the first day back at school, I decided to start and track my studying. And each cell represents a day since January 8th. And on January 8th, I did not study. But after that rough start, it's 2 months later now, and I've consistently studied 5 to 7 days a week for the last 2 months. So the question is, how did I go from a student only studying the night before tests to fundamentally changing my studying habits and studying for 2 months straight? What was my secret? Well, I had a mantra, something that I told myself every day when I was thinking, you know what, I'll just do this tomorrow. Whenever I got the urge to procrastinate, I told myself this one phrase. I noticed that it not only cut down on my procrastination, but it also increased my focus. I found myself going from just rereading notes to studying for 2-3 hours at a time. So what was it? Just get started. Its power lies in its simplicity, and I have some science to back it up. There was a study published in Psychology Today in which university students were given a task on Monday to complete by Friday. So what did they do on Monday? They said, I'll do it tomorrow. What did they do on Tuesday? They said, I'll do it tomorrow. On Wednesday, they also said, I'll do it tomorrow. And what was interesting was the study had them record how they viewed the task on each of those days. And what did they think? They thought it was going to be hard, they thought it was going to take a long time, and they thought it was going to be boring. But then on Thursday, the day before it was due, and they actually started the task, they realized that their perception instantly changed. They realized it wasn't as hard as they thought it was going to be. It wasn't going to take as long. And some of them actually found it enjoyable and wished they'd started earlier. What does this tell us? This tells us that our perception of a task is heavily influenced by our opinion. If we don't want to do a task because we want to procrastinate, our brain is going to tell us that it's going to be harder, it's going to take longer, it's going to be more boring. But once you just get started, you correct that. The hardest part of any task is just getting started. This is perfectly illustrated by the Newtonian law of physics of objects at rest stay at rest, and objects in motion stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. The hardest part is changing your status quo, and it's a psychological barrier more than anything else. Once you just get started, you realize that your brain was tricking you into procrastinating. And once you realize the power of just getting started, and you start to just get started, and you use it more and more every day in your life, you see that it becomes easier and easier to recognize when your brain is lying to you by telling you to just do it tomorrow. So I've used this several times in my life. The first time was when I wrote a book. This book was on the death penalty. It was a topic that I was extremely passionate about. And I loved researching for it, but I hated writing it. The blank page that I would stare at every day intimidated me. But when I just got started, when I wrote that first word, I found that the words just flowed out. All it took was just getting started, and all the anxiety and the fear just faded away. And a year later, I'd written 15,000 words and gone through redrafts and edits, and I had published a book. Another time was when playing soccer, I tore my ACL. I wanted to get back to the field as soon as possible, so against my doctor's advice, I started lifting. And this next picture was taken less than a year later of me squatting 285 pounds for 3 sets of 5 reps. I did not enjoy going to the gym. But I found that as soon as I committed myself, and as soon as I just took that first step into the gym, my perception immediately changed. I started looking forward once I was committed to just getting started. And so 3 times a week, I went to the gym less than a year later. My knee was fine, and I haven't heard it since. And then finally, with the SAT, with my studying, my original score was a 1280, and it's grown past the 1520 to where the last one that I took was at a 1570. So now you're thinking, that's great, but can it really help me? Can something so simple really help me make meaningful, positive change in my life? Can it help me achieve the goals that I've been telling myself I'll start tomorrow? Can it help me do something? You'll never know. Unless you just get started. Thank you.